Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was banished by his family and became legendary part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The Hidden Leaf Village is a beautiful place. Hashirama Senju, the first Hokage, picked out the location along with his best friend Madara Uchiha. Together they established the strongest of the elemental nations and paved the way for the rest of the world to follow. Here we find ourselves, overlooking the village hidden in the leaves from atop the very same mountain Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju once stood. Of course, there have been some changes made to the surrounding landscape. Now, down below, rather than a lush green forest, there is a populous and thriving village. Shinobi and civilians interacting and living their lives. The village was always a happy place. Today marks the 5 years anniversary of the defeat of the nine-tailed fox at the hands of the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze and his triplets. With the help of his wife, Kushina Uzumaki, the 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, and 2 of the 3 legendary Sannin, Tsunade Senju and Jiraiya the Toad Sage, Minato Namikaze was able to split the 9 tails into 3 separate containers. 1. His eldest daughter Mito, who was a carbon copy of her mother, his youngest daughter Narumi that had his hair and blue eyes, and the other in his youngest son Menma. Menma had a similar body structure to Minato, but Menma got his crimson hair and violet eyes he got from his mother. From the top of the Hokage monument you can see them walking through the streets to their favorite restaurant Ichiraku Ramen. Along the way, the villagers are all smiling at the sight of Minato, 26, and Kushina, also 26, parading through the busy streets with the prince and princesses of the leaf. Mito, Narumi, and Menma are celebrating their 5th birthday with some lunch at their favorite restaurant before they get ready for their birthday party. Each year they are showered with gifts from council and clan heads alike. This year they were excited because they would be starting training. They expected to get all of the best shinobi weapons and attire from their godparents, Tsunade and Jiraiya, and the other clan heads. But they had no idea what their parents were going to get them. They had tried to find out only to be told, "It's a secret, but you're gonna love it." Whatever it was, both parents seemed to be excited about it. This feeling of joy and excitement rubbed off on everybody. Whenever the 10th of October rolls around, the entire village just seems happier. Well, all except for one. Atop the Hokage monument, on the head of Tobirama Senju, we find Naruto Namikaze. The eldest child of Minato and Kushina Namikaze and heir to the Namikaze Uzumaki clan. Naruto had spent the day all alone, just like he spends any other day. His parents always ignored him for his younger siblings and the rest of the village seemed to follow. Today is his 6th birthday, but he was the only one who knew it. Every year he would wonder if his parents would remember. He wanted nothing more than to celebrate with his family and just have someone to be around, someone who loved him. While Minato and Kushina never directly tried to hurt him, he was always treated as an annoyance. He was constantly seen as inferior to his siblings and he couldn't understand why. Naruto learned a lot about himself on his 5th birthday, none of it was shared. Flashback. 1 year ago. Naruto was excited. He couldn't sleep all night because he was so excited for today. The day he turned 5. This wasn't just your normal birthday. No, clan heirs are typically trained from the age of 5 on through their time at the academy so they can graduate at the top of their classes. Naruto had noticed that his parents never seemed to have an interest in him for as long as he could remember, but this would be the year he changed that. This year he would work hard and show that he will be the best clan heir you could ask for. Naruto ran downstairs to see his parents decorating the house with "Happy Birthday" signs. Naruto couldn't help but crack a 100-watt smile at his parents who were just noticing him. "Ah, I knew you guys would remember," said Naruto, tears forming in his eyes from the sheer happiness that was flooding his system. Kushina and Minato exchanged a quick glance before looking at their son with a confused expression. Kushina spoke up first. Of course we wouldn't forget your brother's and sister's birthday. She came across as offended at the fact that her son believed she would forget such an important day. Naruto's eyes widened, horror and sadness quickly replacing happiness. What do you mean, brothers and sisters' birthday? Naruto choked out, holding back tears at this point. Minato was very confused now. First his son comes down, happy as can be, then Kushina talks about how they are prepping for the triplets' birthday and now he is on the verge of tears. It was at that moment Naruto knew, he was really nothing to them. His birthday, the one day a year that he was supposed to be happy, and his parents didn't even bother to remember it. The tears were flowing freely now as Naruto ran back upstairs and slammed the door. He couldn't believe what was happening. His parents forgot about his birthday. For as long as he could remember, he hadn't had a birthday party or been involved in the party with his siblings. But this year was worse. He knew deep down he shouldn't have gotten his hopes up, but couldn't help but get excited about being a part of his family. He didn't want extravagant presents like the triplets would always get. He didn't want big parties and hordes of guests. All Naruto wanted was to be accepted by his family, and they basically told him he was insignificant. Naruto cried for hours, no one ever coming to check on him. He heard when his siblings woke up and went downstairs to see their living room covered in decorations. The sound of laughter and happiness was like a knife to his heart. It only got worse at the party. Everybody treated Naruto like he didn't exist. He was treated like a bother, and when the occasional visitor talked to him, it was always about his siblings. What's it like being related to the prince and princess of the leaf? Or, how are Lord Menma, Lady Narumi, and Lady Mito today? Or the one that crushed his spirits like a nut in a nutcracker? I didn't even know Lady Mito, Lady Narumi and Lord Menma had a sibling. After realizing that no one would miss him if he left, he wandered into his parents' library. On the table, he saw a couple books laying out titled Introduction to Chakra Control, Beginner's Chakra Theory, and My Training Regimen. There were 2 copies of the last one. Naruto started to look through the books, only sparing a brief glance at each page. Right as Naruto was looking at the last couple pages of Introduction to Chakra Control, Minato and Kushina walked into the room, each smiling. They saw Naruto looking through the twins' gifts and reacted naturally. Naruto, don't touch that, it doesn't belong to you. Kushina's scream startled Naruto, making him rip the page he had in his hand. The gates of hell were opened. Both Kushina and Minato started yelling at Naruto so loud the party downstairs stopped. Everyone present bore witness to one of the harshest verbal lashings ever given to anyone, let alone a 5-year-old. They accused Naruto of being jealous, a brat, just being an all-around bother to them. Naruto couldn't look at them. He stared at the floor and cried. As the lashing intensified, Naruto could barely maintain his composure. He was muffling his sobs when his mom grabbed him by the face. Lowering herself to his level, she continued. What the hell are you crying for? You break your sibling's present and now you think you can get off if you just cry. Get out of my sight. I don't want to see you for the rest of the night. Kushina hollered, inches away from Naruto's face. Naruto dragged himself out of the library and to his room. He didn't sleep that night. Present time. As Naruto thought back, he discovered 2 things. First, he has a photographic memory. All he needs is the slightest glimpse or exposure to something and he can remember as perfectly for the rest of his life. He remembered every single word his parents said to him that night. The mere memory of that night wrecked him emotionally. Naruto had made a few attempts to bridge the gap between him and his family. His father had started to train Mito, Narumi and Menma every day, oftentimes leaving his paperwork for the night so he can fully dedicate himself to the triplets. They weren't exactly quick learners. Minato was considered a prodigy and Kushina was one of the hardest workers on the face of the planet, so naturally they were able to rise through the ranks and become the 2 strongest ninja in the Hidden Leaf. They were also determined to make Mito, Narumi, and Menma as strong as possible, for the fate of the world rested on their shoulders. Naruto remembered hearing about some prophecy pertaining to the triplets, but little did he know that was the reason he was pushed aside. Flashback 1 week after the Nine Tails attack. Are you absolutely sure, Jiraiya? Asked a troubled Minato, sparing a worried glance at his wife. Jiraiya had just rushed back from an emergency summons to Mt. Myabaku. The Toad Sage had important news he needed to share with Minato immediately. Jiraiya had received a prophecy from the Toads about Minato's and Kushina's children. According to the Elder Toad's foresight, a child of the Yellow Flash and Crimson Death would use powers never seen before to bring the world into an era of either peace or chaos. Immediately Jiraiya believed it to be either Mito, Narumi, or Menma, since they would be trained in how to harness the power of the Nine Tails. The only previous container, Mito Uzumaki, yes, in this story, Kushina was never the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, hence she survived the attack on the leaf, had never been able to do much more than suppress the beast. The fact that the power was split up into two containers would make the chakra usable, and maybe the triplets would one day master their power. Jiraiya had believed completely forgot the eldest child of the Namikaze Uzumaki family. There isn't a doubt in my mind. One of the triplets will be the child of prophecy. We need to do all we can to put them down the path of peace and not chaos. That means they need 100% of our attention. Kakashi, Tsunade, the two of you and I will have to do everything in our power, make the village see them as saviors and not monsters, train them to fight so they can handle the hardships they are destined to face, and above all else keep them happy. We can't afford to have the child of prophecy fall into darkness. Jiraiya said with unwavering conviction. His words rallied Kushina for the upcoming tasks. Minato still had some worries. What about Naruto? Minato said. The others in the room could sense the worry in his voice. He and Naruto had bonded within the year since his birth. Naruto was a carbon copy of Minato. Minato had never felt as happy as the day of Naruto's birth. All the accomplishments and praise he received meant nothing to him. The undying love he felt for his child was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Never having parents of his own, Minato wanted nothing more than to have a family when he was growing up. He had the love of his life with him and was blessed with a healthy son. He would never forget the day, October 10th. It was the day he was completed. He had a son to bond with, tell stories to, tease, and do everything he never got to. Now, Jiraiya was telling him to put Naruto aside for his new kids. Now don't get him wrong, he loved Mito, Narumi, and Menma just as much as Naruto, but he knew what it means to be alone in the world, and he wouldn't wish it on his worst enemy. He had to deal with it because his parents had died in the Second Great Ninja War. The day of their funeral, a 5-year-old Minato vowed that he would become strong enough to defend those close to him. He would protect his family and never abandon them to the cruel shinobi world they lived in. Looking at Jiraiya as if daring him to say the wrong thing, Minato awaited an answer. Kushina beat Jiraiya to the punch. Hell no. We are not going to abandon him. He is as much our child as Mito, Narumi, and Menma. We just need to focus on the triplets a bit more. Flashback end. Hokage office. A bit more. Minato thought to himself as he signed off on his and Kushina's gift to the triplets. Minato deeply regretted not shooting down that prophecy nonsense as soon as Jiraiya brought it up. Every time he saw Naruto his heart broke a little. His eldest seemed to be completely broken. Minato would often catch Naruto watching the triplets interact with his family and friends. His eyes full of remorse and longing. The Namikaze name carries merit and power all around the world. Minato had built a legacy for his children to build from, but you wouldn't think that Naruto was Namikaze by the way he is treated. Most of the village had forgotten he even existed, and those that didn't gave him the moniker of the other Namikaze. When Minato heard that it took Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Kushina to keep him from killing the civilian council member that addressed Naruto in such a way, he wasn't the only one with doubts. Kushina, while stubborn and headstrong, wasn't entirely sure this was the best course of action. It pained her to see Naruto heartbroken, but she knew that the fate of the entire world was in the balance. She kept telling herself that she just had to make it to the triplets' 5th birthday, then they would start training the triplets. Kushina figured when they started training the triplets things would be easier. She would fully devote herself to Mito, Narumi, and Menma, and she wouldn't have time for anything else. She never went back on her word, and on the day Jiraiya came to her in Minato with the prophecy, she vowed to be the light for her Mito, Narumi, and Menma. She wouldn't allow them to slip into darkness. The pain she felt in her heart never faded though. It got harder and harder for her to see Naruto, so much so that she would often blow up at anything Naruto did and send him away. Her emotions often shifted from sadness to anger in the blink of an eye. Naruto would often get scolded over minor things because Kushina needed to vent some of the anger she held for herself. She figured eventually things would smooth out with Naruto. Today the triplets would start training. Mito was always self-motivated, but would get discouraged easy, and Menma's laziness rivaled that of Inara. Narumi was always kind-hearted and trying to make everyone happy. It killed her to see Naruto sad. All they needed to come up with a way to keep them focused and something to remind them to push on when their training was hard. She had come up with it and forced Minato into going through with it. Tonight was going to be a big night. Party at the Namikaze compound. Yes, they have a compound, not just a small house like in canon. Tonight was very important for all the Leaf residents. To score points with the Hokage, many civilians and shinobi alike would pull out all the stops and get only the best gifts for Mito, Narumi, and Menma. One year, Minato wanted to turn away the gifts, but Kushina rejected the notion, saying they weren't his gifts to return. Wanting to keep the triplets happy, he complied, albeit reluctantly. This year was the worst yet. In the back corner of their rather lavish living room stood 3 mountains of gifts. One for Mito, one for Narumi, and one for Menma. If one were to look to the left of the impressive stacking feet, they would see the eldest Namikaze. Naruto was sitting at the end of the stairs in a plain black shirt and dark gray shorts. His messy blonde hair shadowed his eyes from all the party-goers. He was forced to attend the party every year, as if to rub in his face the fact that his siblings got more than he could ever dream of, while he got nothing. No love, no acceptance, no real family or friends. A single tear ran down Naruto's face over his trademark whisker birthmarks, 3 on each side. He was pulled from his agony by his mother speaking up to gather everyone's attention. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate you all taking the time to come and celebrate Mito, Narumi, and Menma's 5th birthday. Kushina said with a beautiful smile on her face, reminding many why she was one of the most sought-after maidens in the elemental nations. Anything for the prince and princess of the Leaf. A rather drunk civilian slurred out sincerely. Kushina's smile widens as she looks back at Mito, Narumi, and Menma sitting next to each other, with Minato to the right on Menma with Narumi to his left, and Mito to her left. We are going to start opening gifts, so please if you would do this orderly, we wouldn't want a repeat of last year. Kushina warned with smile that promised pain to anybody who ruined Mito, Narumi, and Menma's big day. Minato laughed nervously. He remembered what his wife had done to a few civilians that rushed to share their gifts and ended up running into an end table and breaking her favorite vase. The crowd remembered too, so they organized themselves into a line, civilians first then shinobi second. Naruto watched with envy basically oozing from him. He watched as his siblings received top-of-the-line training gear, masterfully crafted weapons, jutsu scrolls, and countless books pertaining to combat intelligence and chakra theory. His siblings were well-mannered for the most part. Some of the books got a disapproving look from Menma, but with a dangerous glare from Mito and Narumi, he quickly shaped up. Now their godparents were approaching them, each holding the sealing scroll. The twins' eyes widened to the size of dinner plates as Jiraiya and Tsunade laid the scrolls on the table, and gesturing for the twin to sign them. With a childish glee, Menma signed the Toad contract and began yelling about how he would become the strongest shinobi ever. Mito and Narumi were much more reserved but still wore a rather large smile as they signed the slug contract. The room was in shock. All the shinobi had heard stories about two of the strongest summons clans, the Toads and Slugs. They also knew that only a handful of people in history had signed those contracts, putting the prince and princess in some very good company. The onlookers started to applaud as Kushina and Minato rose from their seats. As they were walking to the front of their children, Naruto noticed that his father was holding something in his hand that had the official seal of the Hokage on it. A little curious, Naruto rose and inched his way through the crowd until he was directly behind his parents. When he got there, he could clearly hear something that would change his life forever. Minato quieted the crowd and noticed his eldest had made his way to the front row. A moment of eye contact with Naruto made Minato consider scrapping this entire idea. He wasn't sure he could this to him in the first place, but to do it at a time like this, in front of all the important figures in the village. That would make things immensely harder. Minto thought that maybe, by some chance, this whole ordeal would go over Naruto's head. He was still a child after all. Stealing his resolve, Minato decided to continue. I would like to thank you all for the gifts and on behalf of my entire family, I hope you enjoyed the night and we can celebrate like this many more times in the future. Minato cracked a charismatic smile that was reciprocated by the entire crowd. For some reason, Naruto got the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Looking around, he didn't see anything out of place around the room, so he decided to curb his thoughts and return his attention to his father. We just have one last gift to give to Mito, Narumi, and Menma tonight. Naruto narrowed his eyes, the foreboding feeling returning, but this time much, much stronger than before. As the fourth Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves, I, Minato Namikaze, name Mito Namikaze Uzumaki, the heir of the Uzumaki clan, Narumi Namikaze Uzumaki, the heir of the Namikaze clan, and will personally be training Menma so he can one day take my place as Hokage. The crowd reactions were mixed. The overwhelming majority erupted into a craze of cheers and clapping. Some even went as far as to whistle and scream like they were celebrating a victory in the Chunin exams. A select few knew what this meant. Shukaku Nara, the Nara clan head, and his son Shikamaru stared in disbelief. They knew Naruto and even kind of liked the boy. He was kind and warm-hearted to everybody, but his eyes held a sadness that is indescribable. They didn't really know what caused the sadness, but now they got their answer. A couple in the crowd looked on stoically. Hiyashi Hyuga and Fugaku Uchiha seemed indifferent towards the news. Behind Minato, Jiraiya and Tsunade were hugging and congratulating Menma and Mito respectively. Both children were the happiest they had ever been in their life. Menma was shedding tears of joy while he buried himself into Jiraiya's chest, laughing and smiling the entire time. Mito was uncharacteristically expressive too. She was smiling and openly laughing with Tsunade, going as far as to jump off her chair and into Tsunade's waiting arms. Narumi ran and gave her father the biggest hug imaginable. The celebrations were cut short when there was a sudden explosion of chakra in front of them. All eyes widened at the display of power and jaws became acquainted with the floor when they saw who was emitting this suffocating presence. In the center of the room stood Naruto, shooting a glare at his father that would turn Medusa to stone. Around him whipped vicious wisps of light blue chakra, tearing up floorboards and blowing back civilians and shinobi that were unfortunate enough to be nearby. His eyes held pure rage and betrayal, while his body released more chakra than the average Jonin. His parents looked at him with wide eyes, for several reasons. The first of which was they didn't know that Naruto had awoken his chakra. Secretly, Naruto had been training in chakra control and studying chakra theory at the public library. He naturally was able to mold his chakra easily, making the tree walking exercise and water walking exercise child's play for him. He had even asked Tsunade for some basic medical ninjutsu he could train in, but was sharply denied. The second reason was the sheer amount of chakra he was emitting. While the Uzumaki blood ran strong in his veins, Even a full-blood Uzumaki's chakra reserves were dwarfed by Naruto's. If he has the equivalent to a Jonin at the age of 6, what will he be like when he gets out of the academy? Or even after that, Miento's thoughts were almost identical to the thoughts of Tsunade, Kushina and Jiraiya. Naruto cut their thoughts short as he took a step forward, the wood floor splintering under his feet. "Excuse me," said Naruto, far too calmly for the situation he was in. "If I heard you correctly, you just took away the only thing that this family has ever given me." Naruto continued to walk towards his parents, snapping them out of their trance. "Naruto, you don't understand. We were just..." Kushina was cut off when Naruto's chakra jumped up to a whole other level. Kakashi looked at Naruto in awe. "He's radiating more chakra than I have." He was interrupted from his thoughts when Naruto spoke again. I don't understand. Naruto yelled, releasing even more of his stored chakra, shattering windows and blowing everything in the house away like a tornado. "Let me tell you what the fuck I understand. None of you care about me. You ignore me for years because of those three, and now you take the only thing I ever had. The only thing that ever proved that I existed." Naruto continued as tears were flowing freely down his face. "Do you know what today is?" he asked his parents. Most of the crowd was trembling at this point from the sheer chakra being whipped around the room. "Do you?" Naruto hollered, making everyone in the room wince. At a loss for words, Kushina and Minato tried to talk, but nothing came out of their mouths. The sadness and neglect in Naruto's eyes was replaced by pure rage. Minato's eyes widened in realization, but before he could speak, Naruto did. "Today's my birthday." Naruto yelled so loudly even a certain pink-haired Banshee councilwoman was shocked. The room fell into a state of disbelief. Minato and Kushina stared at their son. Shock, sadness, self-loathing, all fighting for control over their emotions. Now they understood why Naruto always acted the way he did on this day. For 5 years, it hadn't been his birthday, it had been the triplets' birthday. Never had he been acknowledged alongside the triplets, he had always been alone in the shadow of the triplets. He wasn't there voluntarily. He was put there by his parents and godparents. Their obsession with the prophecy and the triplets had made it impossible for him to get the one thing he wanted. Love. He felt unwanted by his parents and unloved by his godparents. He was sick of it. He may be 6, but he had the intelligence of an academy graduate. He was a genius, a prodigy, but his parents wouldn't have known. They never took an interest in him. Naruto remembered all of it. Each painful rejection, each unwarranted chastising, all of it was burned into his mind because of his photographic memory. Tears started to fall from his parents' eyes, but Naruto didn't notice. "Maybe it would just be better if I just didn't exist." Naruto yelled as the entire house was enveloped in a bright flash, and when everyone recovered, Naruto was gone. Minato was the first one to snap out of his daze. "Anbu!" he yelled uncharacteristically loud. In the blink of an eye there were 4 masked figures in generic Anbu garb kneeling in front of him. "Find him. Please find my son." As soon as Minato finished, the Anbu dispersed, mobilizing 4 battalions of Anbu and other shinobi to find the eldest Namikaze. Minato turned to his family to see a troubling sight. Instead of the happy laughing children he has seen moments ago, Mito, Narumi, and Menma were trembling and being comforted by the 2 Sannin. Then he looked to the left and saw his wife. She was a combination of sad and enraged. She was in a heap on the floor crying, rethinking everything they had done to this point. Minato could only hope that his Anbu found Naruto before he did anything to harm himself. Top of the Hokage monument. A very drained and pissed off Naruto laid flat on top of the second Hokage's stone face. His emotions were a hurricane of sadness, rage, and disappointment. He had trained himself into the ground for the past year to try and impress his parents. He just wanted to be accepted by his parents and godparents, so he trained. Every waking moment was dedicated to bettering himself and further enhancing his natural abilities. This wasn't how he wanted to reveal them. He just wanted his family to be happy for him. He just wanted them to be proud of him, not treat him like a nuisance. Naruto cried quietly to himself, looking off the edge and considering jumping. He was interrupted by a ruffling in the bushes behind him. He expected it to be one of his father's Anbu, but was surprised when instead he came face to face with a particularly unique character. In front of him stood an 18-year-old who looked like he was in his early 20s. He had shaggy brown hair that sat in a sort of organized chaos on top of his head. He stood just shy of 6 feet, and wore black sweatpants that covered his legs completely. Instead of the usual shinobi sandals Naruto had grown accustomed to, the stranger wore jet black combat boots to match his sweatpants. His torso was covered with a dark gray muscle shirt. Black straps could be seen wrapped around his body supporting the sheath for 2 9-inch black-bladed Bowie knives. The stranger was spinning one in his hand like it was second nature. The knife whipped around his hand in a blur, but looked completely natural. The hilts were a vibrant gold, while the handle was covered in black leather. The knives were placed parallel to his spine and on either side. His build was on the larger side. His chest and stomach was out in the open, covered only by his skin-tight muscle shirt. The shirt did little to veil his battle-hardened body. His chest and abs were well defined and you could make out every detail in his arms. His body is like Captain America as soon as he got out of the pod. Over everything he wore a brilliantly gold cloak that was open in the front and rimmed with black outlines and accents along the edges and pockets. He had a weird design on the back of the cloak that looked like a small Star of David within another larger Star of David. The stars were connected by many extravagant lines and tomos encircling the design. The design was perfectly symmetrical as if it were meticulously created. Around his neck was a golden necklace with a white gold anchor charm in the center of his chest. Lastly, on his back were 2 identical swords. Each had a handle that was 1/4 meters, covered in black leather like the knives on his back. The blades were exactly 1 meter long. The hilts were covered by some sort of medical bandage that sealed the swords in their sheaths. The details of the blades remained secret to any onlooker. His neck was exposed, showing a few nasty-looking scars that seemed to run down onto his torso. His face and jawline were very prominent, lacking any kind of fat or excess weight. His face was absent of scars, but his eyes were piercing. The gold around his pupils seemed to glow in the dim lighting of the forest. His eyes expressed wisdom beyond his age, interesting Naruto to no end. Naruto couldn't take his eyes off the man as he approached. His stature and demeanor demanded respect, but it was well deserved. On top of the confidence that came off him in droves, he had the most welcoming aura Naruto had ever experienced. Something just made you want to be around him. As he got closer, Naruto just seemed to be at ease. All the emotions that were running rampant in his mind were all calmed in his presence. He carried himself like a deity, his steps making no noise. The moonlight reflected off his cloak to give his overall appearance the mystical feel. "You know, I've thought about it too," the mysterious stranger said as he took a seat next to the still-standing Naruto. He continued with his gaze fixed on something in the distance. "How easy it would be to just end things now. Nobody would miss me. All the pain I feel would finally end. I wouldn't be alone anymore." Naruto noticed his neighbor's eyes changed from welcoming and comforting to extreme sadness. "What did you have to go through to carry that much sadness?" "It turns out somebody else had different plans," the man said with a slight chuckle as he took the knife in his right hand, rolled up his left sleeve to his elbow, and cut his left wrist all the way down his veins. As blood started to pour out, Naruto began to panic. In a shaken hurry, Naruto grabbed his arm and tried to apply pressure to the wound. As he pushed down, he felt something shifting under his hand. As Naruto removed his blood-soaked hand from the stranger, he watched in awe as the wound rapidly closed, leaving a bit of steam as the skin reconnected. Naruto looks up to meet the eyes of the stranger, his eyes begging for answers. His curiosity was met with a low chuckle from the stranger. Imagine my shock when I jumped of a building to end it, but everything grew right back just like before I landed. He fixed his sleeve and returned his gaze to Naruto. The look of compassion and acceptance had returned. It took me trying it to realize it was the right choice. People like you and me, we may be pushed aside. We may get left out or ostracized. We may be hated and even hunted to the ends of the earth, but it's our responsibility to do as much good as possibility. We can't let their ignorance and stupidity be our downfall. The man stood up and walked away from the edge. Once he was about 10 feet from the edge, he extended his right hand and opened his palm. In a flash of brilliant rainbow-colored flame, the same flames as the dragons in Avatar, The Last Airbender, a 2-meter golden staff appeared in his hand. Upon closer observation, one would notice the black indentions running all through the length of the staff. The tip facing Naruto had what looked like spread eagle wings, and in between the two wings was a gem that was constantly shifting colors like it was alive. On the back end there was another gem, but this one was pitch black, making it look almost like the tip of a kunai. I see too much of myself in you, Naruto. I see the pain and sadness in your eyes that I carried when I was your age. I want nothing more than to help you, to give you the one thing you always wanted. The man said as he turned to Naruto with his left hand extended. I'm asking you to trust me. If you want to be strong, I'll make you the strongest shinobi on the face of the planet. If you want to travel the world, I'll take you along for the ride and we can see everything the elemental nations have to offer. As much as you want a family, I want one too. He said as he took a few steps toward Naruto, his left hand still extended. Naruto didn't know what to do. Just after his parents had finally confirmed his worst fears, he had this teenager come and offer him everything he ever wanted. Naruto wanted to be skeptical. If his own family didn't want anything to do with him, then why would a stranger? As his internal war raged on, he didn't notice the man walk towards him and embrace Naruto. Every doubt he had in his mind was erased right there. He felt the sincerity in what the man had told him. He could feel the desire to help and tears began to form in his eyes. He had never been hugged like this by his family. They rarely spoke to him and outright avoided physical contact. In this man's arms, he felt something he hadn't in a while. A rush of every positive emotion he hadn't experienced in years, happiness, relief, and acceptance flooded his mind as he buried himself in the chest of this stranger. Thank you, Naruto choked out as he tried to maintain his composure. Ace. My name is Ace, the former stranger shared. You aren't alone anymore. I will always be there for you, Naruto. Happy birthday, Naruto. Ace released his staff as it disappeared in the same flash it appeared in. He pulled out a necklace like his own from his right cloak pocket and put it around Naruto's neck. He then fully embraced the boy, feeling many of the same emotions as Naruto. As tears fell from their eyes, they knew one thing. They weren't alone anymore. Time skip 11 years. A 17-year-old, shirtless blonde rose out of bed at 7 a.m. like he had every day for the past decade. He walked out of his room and into the bathroom to go through his usual morning routine. When he got in front of the mirror, he got a good look at himself. Long gone was his child body he had when he met Ace. It was replaced by the type of body girls can only dream of. The muscles of his chest and stomach looked like they were carved in granite. No real deposits of fat existed on his body, so with the absence of his shirt, you got to follow each individual muscle and all its movements. His muscles were much denser than a normal shinobi as well, making his skin seem like it is reinforced and hard to pierce. Below the belt, Naruto had legs that could carry him for days and not give out. His punches and kicks were strong enough to shatter bones like glass and pierce iron like paper, but his strength was something that he considered his weak point. Naruto focused more on speed. Without his resistance seals, Naruto was faster than the current Raikage with his lightning armor active. Early in his training he realized that there were certain things he would never catch Ace in. Strength was one of those. Ace's bones were made out of some sort of metal that he boasted was the strongest metal in existence. Comparing Ace's strength to that of Tsunade Senju would be like comparing a professional weightlifter to a newborn. For the first 5 years, Ace wouldn't throw punches at Naruto in fear of permanently damaging him. As Naruto grew up, he naturally became tougher and stronger than anybody in his generation. All those kickings by Ace were at least good for something. Naruto could confidently say that he could best nearly everyone in a strictly taijutsu fight. He wanted to fight against Guy when he had opened the 8 gates, but hadn't had the opportunity. Naruto didn't consider what he did as training. Ace was a slave driver and would work Naruto till he couldn't walk every day for the past 10 years. His body was constantly sore and his head always hurt from memorizing new things. Every day, Naruto was with Ace from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., working on whatever Ace had planned for the day. Usually, the first and last hour were used for meditation on the day's techniques. During this time, Ace would also funnel minimal amounts of his power into Naruto's system, allowing Naruto's body to adapt to the power over time. They would sit back to back and Ace would manifest what his power. Ace's power was unlike anything Naruto had ever seen or heard of. For one, Ace didn't use chakra. Instead, Ace described his power as the ability to manipulate energy itself. He said that where he was from there were 5 kinds of people. The first of which have the rapid regeneration he had demonstrated the night they met. The second group had the ability to control matter and energy with their mind, or telekinesis as Ace called it. This ability is what allows Ace to manipulate any type of ninjutsu style by manipulating the energy around him. No hand signs were required, all he must do is clap his hands together to balance the power he would put into the attacks. Imagine the way Ed and Al transmutate in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, even the awesome little sound. While he could use every element on the level of the second Hokage's water style, the things Ace could do with fire, lightning, and wind amazed Naruto every time he saw them. Ace's fire required ridiculous amounts of water to put out and would burn hot enough to melt stone and steel like butter. He could mold it into almost any shape of form he could imagine. Naruto still had a few scars from when Ace chased him around with a rainbow fire tiger. Lightning and wind were just as remarkable. His telekinesis powers weren't restricted to energy, they could manipulate matter in the world that Ace's presence touched, excluding people and other living animals. He must touch animals and humans physically, then he could move them with his mind. He could also summon beautiful golden and black vectors, as Ace called them. They looked like giant 2D circles that had many designs around the center. Think the magic circles from early on in Fairy Tail. These would appear wherever Ace designated. These produced a force that will push anything in front of it. Naruto had also noticed that Ace could manipulate his body with telekinesis as well. More than once Naruto had rushed Ace thinking he had an opening, only for Ace to contort his body around and land a bone-crushing hit to his jaw. The third power Ace had was telepathy. He could read the thoughts and sense the presence of anybody within a mile of him. He could alter the memories in reality someone would see if he concentrated hard enough. Naruto was put through a very intense mental conditioning thanks to this power. Now Naruto was impervious to all genjutsu thanks to the absolute mental defense Ace helped him build. Ace could also control someone if he makes eye contact. Looking into his eyes in a fight was like signing your own death sentence. This power got very annoying when they would spar, because Naruto constantly had to focus on hiding his thoughts from Ace or it would be a very painful experience. Eventually, blocking Ace's mental assault became second nature, but he could never find a way to escape after making eye contact when Ace used his Oculus form. Ace's Oculus form was very similar to the Mangekyo Sharingan, but had a few key differences. Rather than making the Susanoo, Ace was capable of transferring energy into a solid state for armor, walls, or anything else he could think of. Ace also had the enhanced perception and predictability that came with the Sharingan. He also had perfect 360-degree vision when he had it active. The design was the same as the symbol on Ace's back, which made sense to Naruto. Ace never told Naruto how he got those eyes, but Naruto didn't press the issue. Telepathy was the power Ace used the least because he didn't want to intrude on a person's privacy. He had developed a way to shut it off like a light switch and would leave it off for a majority of the time. His last power was Naruto's favorite. Ace had the power to teleport anywhere he had in his memory or could see. Like Naruto, Ace had a photographic memory, making it easy for him to travel great distances and an absolute pain in the to fight against. Whenever Ace would teleport, it sounded like he was ripping his very existence from the earth and forcing it somewhere else. It is the sound of a sonito from Bleach. Ace always said that this was his favorite power. He could teleport himself, things he was touching, or things he had marked by placing his palm on them. The mark was the same one as his cloak. Ace's teleportation was the fastest thing Naruto had ever seen. Even his father's flying thunder god technique took a fraction of a second to travel to the seal. You couldn't predict where Ace would appear because he didn't rely on seals. Naruto would always love and hate this ability. It took 5 years for Naruto to unlock these abilities. Each one came in his time of need. He discovered the regeneration first when Ace punched him in the stomach for the first time. His insides were reduced to confetti, but he felt a heat all over his body. Then the pain started to fade. He watched with a combination of horror and awe as he watched his abdomen piece itself back together. While he still had to deal with the pain of his injuries, but from the loss of limbs to the removal of vital organs, Naruto always could regenerate. Ace warned him that he had to protect his spine, because that is where the basis for the regenerative power manifest. Naruto was happy to know his weakness and had already come up with a few ways to protect it. After repetitive regeneration, Naruto's bones also became much denser than they previously were. His bones were similar in strength to steel, but would still shatter like a vase if he took a direct hit from Ace. Naruto had discovered telekinesis when he was attempting to combine elements. Naruto's natural elements were wind and fire, which he mastered within the first 3 years of training with Ace. His mastery over fire was just like Madara Uchiha's, and his mastery in wind allowed him to fly and manipulate air around him in ways few had ever been able to do. He was trying to recreate the first Hokage's wood. Progress was slow until he asked Ace for help at the age of 14. Ace had explained the concepts of energy manipulation for Naruto and walked him through combing 2 different types of energy together. When it was all said and done, Naruto was confident that the first would be proud of his skills in the wood style. On top of the wood style, Naruto also learned how to use the scorch style and ice style. He only learned these because of the attacks Ace could create and use against him. While not really interested at first, Naruto fell in love with these 3 styles. They were all very useful and only limited by the imagination of the user. Naruto had discovered his telepathy when he was trying to block one of Ace's mental assaults. He ended up turning the table on Ace and saw some of his memories. What he saw scarred him. He was scarred to go and poke around in other people's minds now, so he followed what Ace did, and used his telepathy for fights only. He was never able to unlock the control power that Ace had, but he was glad about that. A power like that would be too tempting to use, and Naruto didn't trust himself with something like that. Funny enough, Naruto had discovered his last power, teleportation, mid. While Naruto's base speed may surpass the Raikage, when Ace put effort into his teleportation-style martial arts, Naruto looked like he was standing still. He was desperate to escape a situation in which Ace was repeatedly flicking him in the forehead. And for those that don't know, even Naruto's denser bones were cracked by flicks when Ace tried. Naruto loved everything about teleporting. Ace had helped him work it into different fighting styles, but Naruto was limited to places he could see or had placed his mark on. His mark was a simple chibi Naruto with a thumb up and his tongue sticking out. Ace and Naruto found it amusing. Ace had also taken full advantage of Naruto's photographic memory and taught him a lifetime's worth of martial arts skills in a decade. No matter the opponent, Naruto now had a style he could use to counter them. When you add in his teleportation and telekinesis enhancement potentials, the potential was staggering. Naruto noted many times how much stronger his punches and kicks were when he used telekinesis enhanced his muscles and bones before he struck. Hand-to-hand wasn't the only thing he trained over the years. For Naruto's 7th birthday, Ace made him 2 Bowie knives that were just a few inches smaller than his own, standing at 6 feet 3/4 of an inch as opposed to Ace's 9-inch knives. That year they spent countless hours working on techniques and ways to incorporate the blades into his fighting style. Ace used them for quick and/or quiet kills. He also used these instead of kunai because he could just teleport them back to him or pull them back with his telekinesis. Naruto used them in a very similar fashion, just didn't really like to throw them because he was usually fast enough to close the gap and wouldn't even have to bother throwing the knives. He knew Ace had specifically crafted all his weapons, so wasn't going to change much from how Ace used them. For his 8th birthday, Ace made Naruto a staff like his own. It was the exact same in everything except for weight and the gems on the staff. While Ace's gems were a rainbow color on top and jet black on bottom, Naruto's top gem was gold but his bottom gem was black like Ace's. Ace's staff also weighed somewhere around 250 pounds, Naruto's was at a solid 75 pounds. The staff was Naruto's personal favorite. Everything about it just came naturally to him. He could even annoy Ace in a strictly bow staff fight. Ace showed him how to augment his staff techniques with minor telekinesis usage here and there. Naruto could summon and dispel his staff much like Ace, but he liked to carry it with him whenever his hands weren't full. On his 9th birthday, he received the last of Ace's weapon set, the twin blades on Ace's back. Once again Naruto's blades were shorter, by about 1/4 meter this time. They fit him perfectly. He loved everything about them, and while they were made of the same metal as Ace's, Naruto figured out that each of the weapons Ace made were from metal he had gathered from cutting off limbs and harvesting the bone. Naruto was a bit weirded out at first, but when he confronted Ace about it, Ace said that he trusted Naruto with the strongest substance in existence and wanted to give him only the best equipment to use. He said the only 2 with blades made from that metal were him and Naruto now. Ace was unrivaled in combat. Nobody would ever be able to stand up to him in a fist fight. He had mastered countless styles and shared many of them with Naruto, but Naruto knew he stood no chance against Ace in a taijutsu fight. The second thing Ace was godlike at was his kenjutsu. Ace described the swords as being their own person. He talked about earning the trust of the blades, but Naruto just thought he was a bit crazy. Well, at least he did until Ace unsheathed his blades for the first time. Ace had taken Naruto to a mountain range in the middle of Iron Country. When he took his swords out of their covers, he sliced straight through the largest mountain in the range. The cut was perfect, clean and unlike anything in recorded history. He proceeded to show him the higher level techniques he had created, which involved channeling his own energy, not chakra, into the blade and releasing it as a slash-shaped projectile. The energy would either strengthen the blade or cut through anything in its path. Naruto had to regrow more than a few limbs when he was learning to use and block this technique. Naruto grasped the concepts of kenjutsu very easily and was even able to pick up intermediate techniques and styles in 3 months. He spent the remainder of his time studying high-level techniques and incorporating his own personal touches to each style. The sword style Ace used was called the Dragon Stance. It fully incorporated the powers Ace had and was a combination of every other style Naruto had ever seen. By taking the best parts of each style and mashing them all together, Ace created a style with no weak points. This style was the hardest for Naruto to master because of the complexity of it. The style came natural to Ace because he had been able to use his powers all his life. In contrast, Naruto was still mastering his teleportation and telekinesis. He didn't have either mastered until he was 15. Even after mastering his powers, Naruto's abilities limited the potential of this stance. It would be years until he was truly a master of the Dragon Stance. On Naruto's 10th birthday, Ace sat down with him and spent the day answering any question Naruto had about his past, the training regimen, or anything else Naruto came up with. This conversation lasted all day and Naruto now knew Ace's life story. He explained to him the concepts of space and travel between planets. Ace also pointed out that many things were different in his world. His people aged a lot slower than Naruto's. Ace had deduced that for every year on Naruto's planet, he aged about a week or two. That explained why Ace had barely changed over the 11 years Naruto had known him. There were also minor changes, for example, a year on Legion was 18 months rather than the 12 on Earth. Naruto was amazed by the technology Ace explained. Metal boxes that could travel millions of miles, many times faster than the speed of light. Once Naruto had a basic understanding, Ace got into his life story. He talked about how he was born to a loving mother and father in a faraway planet called Legion. Legion was the center of an intergalactic empire that had ruled for 10,000 years. There had been 3 previous empires, the originals, predecessors, and transcendentals. Ace said that his people were descendants of the predecessors and overthrew the transcendentals in a long, bloody way. Ace described his home as very militaristic. They valued strength and your worth on a battlefield. Almost everyone had a legacy and were trained from the day their 4th birthday to fight. Every kid wanted to grow up and be one of the 5 commanders in the Legion army. There was one to represent each legacy group as well as those without legacies, but the unity of the army didn't end all conflicts. There were many violent outbreaks between divisions that would escalate into full-blown civil wars. There was one thing that made the people unite, an enemy greater than themselves. In Legonian society, it was rare for one person to have 2 legacies. The odds were about 1 in a billion. They existed, and they often thrived in the military, but were kept around because they had a limited amount of power. There were about 100 dual legacy warriors in the army at the time Ace left. There were 3 people who had 3 legacies. Ace had fought the 3 of them when he was younger and upon defeating them, convinced them to leave behind the Legonian army and fight for their own purpose, not the agenda of some politician that didn't care about them. Ace said that people like him were hunted down and killed at all costs. Ace talked about how he lived a happy life until he was 5, then his family was attacked by the Legonian military in fear of what Ace could become. Ace's mother was a beautiful petite woman. She was just over 5 feet tall and was one of the smartest people in the entire empire. She was always hard on Ace, but he knew she only wanted him to succeed. Her name was Alejandra, or Alex for short. She was 25 when she died. His father was the only person that could mentally match his mother. He was a decent height of 5 feet 9, and was a health nut. Most Ace's training was done with his dad. He loved it when his parents were together because they brought out the best in each other. His name was Kenneth. He died at the 24. He said the technical term for his different powers was legacies. Ace said the fear the normal warrior had for Legion, people with the ability to use all 4 legacies, was common and crippling. When he was 4, Ace had awakened a few of his legacies and was seen using them at school. He was recruited into the military at a young age to ensure his loyalty, but his parents rejected the offer. They said that they wished for Ace to have a normal childhood and join the military at the normal age, 16. They didn't take too kindly to the rejection and began bullying his family into submission. Almost a year later, on Ace's 5th birthday, a military special ops team consisting of 12 dual legacy users attacked Ace and his family. They treated it like a game, torturing Ace's family in front of him. They mentally tortured him by replaying the death of his parents repeatedly in his mind. They tortured Ace throughout the entire ordeal. They skinned portions of his body repeatedly and would cut out one eye, but leave the other so he could see what they were doing, and while it grew back they would make him watch as they tortured his parents. Ace's parents didn't have any legacies, so their bodies could only withstand so much. When they died, the soldiers weren't satisfied yet. They tortured Ace for another 5 hours, then they heard a crying from the other room. Inside they found Ace's younger sister. The attackers dragged out the 4-year-old by her solid black hair. She had tears in her eyes when she saw her parents dead on the floor and Ace's severed body parts strewn about the room. Ace said they had their suspicions she was a legion, but there hadn't been one since those two teenagers fled the Empire a few years back. It wasn't the fact that legions could master all 4 legacies that made them a liability. They were always of genius intelligence and had a state they could enter called their apex state. No matter how intelligent one becomes, the apex state throws that out the window. When in the state, a legion fights entirely on instinct. They increase their power and attack capacity exponentially, increase all their senses, and kicks all their legacies into overdrive. Ace said that he had trained in controlling the state, which made him able to fight with the killer instincts of the state, but also keep his wits, making him immeasurably more dangerous. As Ace watched his sister get her throat slit and bleed out in front of him, something snapped. Gone was the helpless child that was just learning his powers. Instead, in his wake was a 5-year-old juggernaut. His body erupted with white power that made those around fall to their knees. Ace showed Naruto the memory of the ensuing slaughter. It was automatic. Ace cut through the 12 commandos like a hot knife through butter. It was all over in the blink of an eye. 12 of the Legonian army's best lay dead at the hands of the newly awoken legion. After that, Ace fled the galaxy. He ran for years, slowly mastering his powers and gathering allies. He was trained by some of the greatest legacy masters in the universe. All of them took a liking to Ace, helping him in any way they could. They all died protecting him when he was cornered by the full might of the Legonian military. At the age of 14 he met his first love. One of the unique things about legions is they always come in pairs. They always ended up meeting eventually. It was fate. She had a very different life than Ace. Her name was Olivia, and she grew up as the only child of a royal telepath family. She got everything she ever wanted and hadn't struggled with anything until she met Ace. He had broken into her house to get food after evading the local authorities. She was the one that found him and engaged him in a one-on-one duel. It was a rather one-sided affair. Olivia was completely outmatched. She had been pampered all her life, and when she met her first real competition, she was anything but prepared. Ace had shown her the error in her ways and opened her eyes to some of the harsh realities they would have to face. While they had the same base abilities, Ace had far surpassed her. She knew that they would also have to stick together to survive. Her family couldn't hide her powers forever. In a knee-jerk decision, she chose to accompany him when he left. She kept in touch with her family, but her life would never be the same. Ace told his story with so much compassion. It scared Naruto how quickly Ace's eyes went from love to absolute sorrow. Naruto didn't push the topic after that. He figured something happened that led to her absence. Whether it was a death or betrayal, Naruto felt like it was a story for another time. From that day on, Naruto felt much closer to Ace. He would confide in Ace and ask for advice with everything. Ace became more than just a friend to Naruto. He became a brother, someone so close, so trustworthy that Naruto had finally found the one thing he always wanted. He finally had a family. On his 12th birthday, Naruto got his first major test. Flashback: Naruto's 12th birthday. Naruto got up a little early this morning, taking a trip down the mountain to a local market to pick up some food for them. When Naruto appeared in the center of the training room, arms full of grocery bags, he was instantly ensnared in chains, restricting all movement. The chains were split between gold and black and looked indestructible. Initially he believed that his mother had found him after all these years. He knew that his father had sent out search parties to find him, but Ace was used to evading people that were much better trackers than the Anbu. They traveled around the elemental nations, meeting people, learning about the world, and making memories that neither of them would forget. From time to time, Naruto would think about his old family. He wondered if they missed him at all. He hadn't seen them since they took away his position as heir to his clan. Naruto didn't regret his choice in leaving. He wished he had met Ace sooner. The thought of his parents and godparents still angered Naruto. He would have to return one day, but for the time being, he was going to stay with Ace and get strong enough to protect those he cares about. Scene change. Hidden Leaf Village. Things changed the night Naruto left. His family became very polarized. Narumi and Minato felt like they should be doing everything they could to find Naruto, while Kushina felt betrayed by Naruto leaving them. She knew he didn't have the easiest of lives, but for him to abandon his village and his family was against the Uzumaki way. She would rip him a new one when they found him. After 5 years, the search for Naruto started to take a back seat to their other responsibilities. The only one that thought of Naruto every day was Narumi. She always prayed to Kami, asking her to return Naruto to them. She wanted to fix the problems with their family, but Naruto left before she could even get the ball rolling. Mito and Menma seemed to hate Naruto for leaving. They never really understood why their parents always kept them separated, but they remember Naruto always trying to see them and be nice to them. Mito tried as hard as she could to forget the good times with Naruto, but she couldn't help but feel empty when she thought about how sad Naruto looked at her 5th birthday party. That wasn't the face she saw. She always saw the happy, goofy older brother that would cheer her up and shower her in love. She would frequently cry at the memory of Naruto, but would never tell a soul. Menma was different from his sisters. He took Naruto's departure so personally that he developed a hatred for his brother. One day his parents found him burning all the pictures of Naruto and everything Naruto left behind, with tears streaming down his face. His parents tried to get him to talk about his feelings, but Menma closed himself off. He was determined to get stronger. He would find his brother and make the fool regret being born. The Namikaze Uzumaki children never wanted to celebrate their birthday anymore. They usually spent the day alone, training or reflecting on themselves. Their eyes had been opened the day Naruto left. They had a new motivation. They were going to find their brother and bring him back, one way or another. Flashback within a flashback. Minato's home office, 1 year before Naruto's departure. Minato was at a particularly low point now. In front of him was Jiraiya ranting about how the Toad Sage had changed his prediction. Minato, we have to do something. The sage is telling us specifically so we can make sure that we prevent anything bad from happening. The prophecy changed to, the child of the yellow flash and crimson death, the child shrouded in darkness will use powers never seen before to mold the world how they see fit. We can't allow Mito, Narumi, or Menma to be shrouded in darkness. I don't care what we have to do at this point, this take priority. Jiraiya was worried. The term, shrouded in darkness, was never used in a good way. He had already talked to Tsunade about making Mito, Narumi, and Menma their only focus. She didn't object. She had gotten very close with Mito and Narumi. Tsunade always wanted a daughter, and Mito and Narui were as close to one as she would get. She was also fond of Menma because of how much he reminded her of Nawaki, her little brother. Menma was always yelling about how he would be the best Hokage ever and make his parents proud. She couldn't help but like the kid and have the desire to keep him and his sisters safe. Kushina and Minato were torn between what they believed was the fate of the world and their own family. They knew that if they went through with Jiraiya's plan, it was likely Naruto would cut ties with them. It pained them to see their son alone, only making it worse when he would inquire about his treatment. Minato always tried to let him down easily. His mother and godparents were rather blunt. Kushina hated herself for putting her son through this, but at the end of the day, if she had to forsake one person to save the world, she knew she had to do it. It would be selfish and irresponsible for her not to do everything she could to ensure the peace her, Minato, Jiraiya and Tsunade have always wanted. She put all her hope into explaining it to Naruto one day. She knew that her son would understand and not hold any hostilities towards her and would even agree with her methods, or so she thought. Tsunade never was fond of Naruto. She wasn't around for the first year he was alive, arriving just a week before the Nine Tails attacked the village to help with Kushina's delivery. She just never got close to him, nor did she really try. She of course was busy, but would put time aside for Mito, Narumi, and Menma. When she looked at Mito she saw her surrogate daughter Kushina, and when she looked at Menma she instantly saw Nawaki. Narumi was so kind and gentle, she would instantly melt away Tsunade's hard exterior. The joy that swept through her when she was with the triplets was exactly what she always wanted. Naruto was never given the same privilege. She just never really was interested in him. She couldn't explain why, but she had brushed him off for years. The thought of it sickened her, but she always remembered the prophecy of the Toad Sage. The day of Nawaki's death she vowed that she would put an end to the senseless violence of the shinobi world. She now had her chance to mold the ones that could bring about the long-sought-after peace. She wouldn't waste this opportunity. Jiraiya was upset. No, he was livid. He never had a family, being a war orphan. His first friends were Tsunade and Orochimaru, and there was a time where he would do anything for them. When Orochimaru betrayed the village, Jiraiya took it personally. He failed to save his friend. He failed to protect the village. He became the one thing he hated most, a failure. When he got the summons from the Toad Sage and heard the prophecy, his life was given a new purpose. He had always wanted to bring about peace to the world so nobody ever had to go through what he did. He may have failed in the past, but this was something he could not mess up. The fact that those he chose to involve didn't seem as committed to ensuring a lasting peace angered him to no end. He was done keeping his thoughts to himself. You are being irrational. Your entire family has the burden to carry, being the family of the Hokage. Mito, Narumi, and Menma upheld their duty the day they were born. They saved the entire goddamn village for fuck's sake. Every word he spoke was true. Minato looked up to see his sensei with his palms at the other end of his desk, looking directly at Minato. Naruto has nothing to do with this. His burden to carry is nothing compared to that of the triplets. It is your job to do your part. The entire world relies on one of the triplets. We can't allow one kid to be the downfall of the entire world. He has no part in this and should be treated as such. He is nothing. Jiraiya's last words echoed for some time. Nobody really noticed how long they stood in silence, but the silence was interrupted by a calm Jiraiya. You must understand, the world is in our hands. We can't put ourselves over the fate of our world. I'm sorry, but I won't forsake the world for one brat. Jiraiya then turned to leave the room but was stopped by Minato calling out to him. I understand, Sensei. We know what must be done. I just hope Naruto will forgive us when the time comes, he added in his head. As they filed out of the office, they didn't realize a small blonde boy sitting behind one of the open double doors. I'm nothing, Naruto mumbled over and over again as tears fell silently down his face. Flashback end. Scene change. Naruto and Ace's home, Land of Iron. Naruto grit his teeth just thinking about his family again. He knew that when it was time for him to become a shinobi, he would have to return home, but he hated the idea of it. It made him feel sick with anger. He had made a promise to Ace that he would give his family a chance when the time came, but Naruto knew he would have little patience for them. Naruto was interrupted from his musings when he heard Ace say something. What? I didn't hear you, Naruto responded, trying to find his brother figure. Ace slowly made his way out of the shadows and walked towards Naruto, who was still chained in the center of the room. Ace was wearing a different cloak today. Rather than his usual divine, gold cloak, he now wore a cloak of similar design, except the color scheme was swapped. The vast majority of the cloak was black, with white trimmings, symbol, and accents. That wasn't the most startling thing though. When Naruto met Ace's eyes, he felt a chill run down his spine. He no longer had the warm golden eyes Naruto had gotten used to. Instead, his eyes were replaced with his oculus form. I said happy birthday, Naruto. His voice sounded slightly on edge, which made Naruto tense. Is there any reason as to why you have me chained? Don't tell me you have some sort of bondage kink, Ace, Naruto said with a mischievous grin. Ace, caught off guard by the joke, erupted into a fit of laughter. They both laughed for about 15 seconds before Ace gathered himself. Naruto, usually I give you some sort of weapon for your birthday present, Ace said in the tone Naruto was used to, smooth and comforting. Well, up until now, you have only had access to half of your true power. For your birthday present, I am going to unlock the second half of your power. Naruto's face lit up. He had been training his off for the past years in order to get strong. He wanted to be able to protect those precious to him, which for the moment was only Ace. He hoped to find a nice girl later in life and start a family, but it was hard for him to make friends. He spent a majority of his time training with Ace, but would also go and mingle with the citizens they came across during their travels. He would oftentimes hear stories about the prince and princesses of the Leaf. He would hear the rumors about him. I heard he attacked his family on his sibling's birthday. I wonder what the Hokage would do to that little monster. He's not a monster. He's just the failure of the Leaf. He is the disappointment. He will never be anything else. Naruto knew exactly where these names came from. All those years ago, when his family stripped him of his birthright in front of all the important villager and shinobi, it was the same as saying that he wasn't worthy of carrying on their family name. If his own parents didn't see him as good enough, how could he expect the simple-minded villagers to see him any differently? He was always insulted as a kid. Mainly by Sakura Hirano and Kiba Inuzuka, sometimes Menma would also jump in. Naruto planned on returning to the Leaf the year his siblings would be graduating, and he would hope that he wasn't placed on a team with anyone that he couldn't stand. When it came to Menma, he idolized Jiraiya. He loved everything about him, even started to take after his perverted tendencies. He started to copy Jiraiya, including how he treated Naruto. To put it simply, it was antagonistic. Jiraiya saw Naruto as the reason Minato and Kushina might forsake the world. He would snap at him, yell at him, send him away, and even go as far as to insult Naruto. He always heard from Jiraiya that it would be hard to put Naruto aside, but that he had to do it, for the sake of the world. Menma took those words to heart. Nobody knew the truth. They didn't know that at the age of 10, Naruto could take on any Jonin in the village. They were too blind. They were foolish, and they deserved to pay. For some reason, when he was at his lowest points, he would hear a voice in his head telling him to kill them all. The voice's favorite line was, "They don't deserve your mercy." To an extent, Naruto agreed with the voice. While he knew that eventually he would be able to fight and defeat his parents and godparents, but the voice seemed to strengthen Naruto. It made him feel like he could fight the Sannin, Yellow Flash, and Red Death. Ace would oftentimes calm him down, but the voice never went away entirely. "It's been harder to control your emotions, recently, hasn't it?" Ace asked, as if he were reading Naruto's mind. The look on Naruto's face told Ace all he needed to know. "Let me tell you a little about the half of your power that is still sealed." Ace pulled his hand from his side and a portion of the stone floor shifted upwards, allowing Ace to sit casually on it. "Much like chakra has a yin and yang, your power has a light and a dark." Ace then started to release his power, a golden and black aura. The ground around Ace shattered at the slightest release of his power. Naruto was always amazed at the density of Ace's power. Ace made the air feel like it became a solid object whenever he released his power. Naruto was glad that the chains were holding him up, because if they weren't, just standing would have been taxing. "The gold in my power is the light side. It is what I have been training you to use. This energy focuses on the happy emotions you feel and naturally limits you because of that. The gold energy is called aura. The black energy consists of all the negative emotions and memories I hold. The black energy is called killing intent. Ki is much harder to use, because in order to master it, you have to accept all of the bad things that have happened to you over the years. This power is only obtainable to the highest caliber legion, Ace stopped channeling his aura Ki but continued to restrain Naruto. He pulled up a chair next to Naruto. Ace rose from his seat and put his hand on top of Naruto's head. I think you are ready to conquer these demons. You are going to lift the limit yourself, so on the count of 3, I am going to break down the natural barriers your mind had put up. It is going to be a struggle and will likely take a few days. I'm going to restrict you the entire time, not for my safety, but for your own. This power will throw off the balance you have obtained over the past 5 years, but if you can master this power along with your aura, you would be the greatest force the elemental nations has ever seen. Ace ruffled Naruto's hair a bit then began to channel some ki into his hand. Prepare yourself, Naruto. 1, 2, thr. Naruto only heard half of the last word before he was pulled into his mind. Naruto opened his eyes to see a plain white room about the size of a football field. He walked towards the center where he saw a figure sitting alone in the darkness. The only source of light in the room was what seemed like a lone spotlight that was directly above Naruto. He approached the figure and was shocked when he got a good look at the figure. The figure was an exact replica of him with a few key changes. For one, the figure's eyes were solid black, jet black hair, and weird black markings running up and down his body, like Akame's during her fight with Esdeath in Akame ga Kill. The figure wore a simple black shirt and white shorts, like Kaneki when he fought Jason in Tokyo Ghoul. He looked up and made eye contact with Naruto. The movement their eyes met, Naruto saw all the hardships he has had in his life. He saw all the times his parents and godparents yelled at him for no reason. He saw all the times he was pushed aside for his younger siblings. He relived every excruciating detail of those encounters and felt the pain of depression he had fought before he met Ace. This time through things felt so much worse. Every new memory he remembered exactly, but hoped that the endings would change. He wished for his parents' acceptance, still to this day. Then he felt a shift. The Naruto in front of him got up and started walking towards Naruto. The tears on his face dried up as his eyes shifted to a burning rage. Naruto was unsure of what to do until he heard the voice that had been plaguing him for the past few months. Kill them all. Spare no one. Train. Gather strength. Then when the time comes, kill everyone who has wronged you. The voice was so sinister that it would make a cage break into a cold sweat. But to Naruto it seemed welcoming. The voice made Naruto feel a sense of purpose unlike anything he had previously experienced. He understood the figure in front of him. Hell, he agreed with it. His family had no right to mistreat him like this. He was done accepting it. He wouldn't lay down and be everyone's bitch anymore. It was about time he did something about the pain that constantly plagued him. A grin etched itself on Naruto's face as he reached for the figure's outstretched hand. Right as he was about to contact the other, Naruto's hand, Ace flashed in his mind. Not just Ace, but all the time they had spent together. The times Ace would crack jokes and they would laugh until their stomachs hurt. The times Ace listened to Naruto and comforted him. The times Naruto cried into Ace's chest after he was reminded of how little his family cared about him. The times Ace snuck Naruto through villages and towns so Naruto's location wasn't discovered. The times Ace went out to eat with Naruto to celebrate his accomplishments. Everything, the good times, the bad times, all of it. Naruto remembered how much Ace had done for him and came to a decision. Rather than grabbing the figure's extended hand, Naruto pulled his counterpart into a warm embrace that made the embodiment of darkness stiffen. Naruto then spoke, instantly feeling himself calm down. It's okay, we aren't alone anymore. We have Ace. They don't matter anymore. The figure sat in shock for a moment before slowly returned the embrace as tears began to run down both of their cheeks. We can dislike them, we can even hate them, something Ace used to say echoed in his head. The worst type of violence is unnecessary violence. We don't need them to be happy. At this point, both the figure and Naruto were beginning to fade. They then began to merge into one as Naruto's vision went black. When he awoke, he was lying flat on his back on a small bed, with a wet towel on his head. Naruto tried to stand up, but as he rose from the bed his legs gave out from under him. Ace appeared out of nowhere and caught him before he became acquainted with the stone floor. Naruto looked up and saw Ace had a massive smile on his face. You did it, Naruto. You have accepted your demons, but didn't let them devour you. You will now be able to train and utilize some your ki without losing control. Eventually you will be able to utilize it completely, but it will take years for you to master Ki. Naruto matched Ace's smile with one of his own, then closed his eyes and let unconsciousness claim him. Flashback. A few months before Naruto's 13th birthday. Scene change. Land of Demons. Naruto had been training in ki usage for a few months but was having trouble. Ace had taken Naruto to the Land of Demons on purpose. Few people lived in the country, so Ace thought it would be a good place to train some of the more destructive parts of their power. Naruto seemed increasingly determined to master his power. He was making rapid progress, much to Ace's delight. Time skip. Naruto's 13th birthday. For Naruto's birthday, Ace had given him something similar to a summoning contract. Ace was partnered with the king of the dragons, Rayquaza. Rayquaza was a massive 125 feet long, and towering over Ace and Naruto. After some convincing, Ray agreed to help Naruto find a partner within his ranks. It was not going very well. Naruto plopped down on the ground with an exaggerated sigh. He had conversed with at least a dozen dragons, but their compatibility never seemed to be optimal. He was about to call it a day when Ray spoke up. Listen, child, this next dragon is my eldest son. His name is Drogon, yes, the one from Game of Thrones. He has never been the kindest creature, but he is extremely powerful and loyal. Just be wary, his respect is not easy to gain, King Ray warned the blonde. In a flash of white-hot fire, a giant black-orange dragon appeared in front of Naruto. The figure was easily bigger than the chief toad Gamabunta. On his hind legs, Drogon stood about 90 feet tall and his scales were sharp like blades. Around his head were long protruding spikes that were each about a foot long. His presence was crushing, taking Naruto a few moments to adjust. Drogon looked around and then he saw Ace. Ah, Ace, did you finally decide to ditch the old geezer and partner with someone from the next generation? I've been waiting for you to call me, you know. You're the only human that has ever bested me in a fight, Drogon said as he aimed a cheeky grin at his father. The gold and green king was about to retort when Ace beat him to it. My memory must be failing me, but the last time you Ray fought, I could have sworn you only lasted 5 minutes, Ace grinned as he acted like he was trying to remember something. His grin grew when he heard a low growl coming from Drogon. Ray cleared his voice, gathering everyone's attention. Actually, Drogon, I called you here to see if you would like to partner with Ace's apprentice. Drogon looked genuinely interested now. Anybody that his father and Ace approved of must truly be a force to be reckoned with. Drogon looked around to find the apprentice his father spoke of, but only found a small child staring back at him. This little shit is really your apprentice Ace? Drogon questioned with unmasked confusion. Yes, I actually consider him a little brother more than I do an apprentice. I can tell you're not impressed, but I would like to inform you that Naruto, who turned 13 today, has already been training in ki usage for a year, Ace said with a sense of pride that was reserved strictly for himself and those close to him. Drogon's eyes widened a tad as he turned his gaze back to the blonde. He lowered his head until he was eye level with child, then a thought crossed his mind. Naruto, sensing something was wrong, calmed himself and started to prepare for whatever might happen next. As he expected, Drogon released a roar that shook the very earth to its core. He held his roar for about 10 seconds, then ended with a nice snap that was mere inches away from Naruto's face. Naruto, expecting some sort of test, didn't even flinch. He stared at the dragon in front of him and spoke nonchalantly. You apparently don't know much about dental hygiene. Drogon grinned in response and turned back to his father and Ace. I like him. Flashback end. Over the years, Drogon and Naruto grew very close. Ace had them train together frequently, which helped with their teamwork and allowed their friendship flourish. Naruto and Drogon had more of a sibling relationship now, built on mutual respect and lots of banter. Ace loved when the two went at each other because they came up with amazing insults. The best part about their relationship was no matter how harsh the insults were, there were never any hard feelings between the two. The verbal spars allowed them to constantly battle with each other but not have to deal with any physical injuries. Needless to say, both parties enjoyed the arrangement. On Naruto's 14th birthday, Ace did something much simpler. He gave Naruto a wristband that would expand over the length of his forearm. On the front was a screen that allowed Naruto to easily manage the many restrictor seals that Ace had placed on him. The wristband could also be used to contact Ace or Drogon at any time and had any feature Naruto could want. It has all the features an iPhone like maps, notes, calendar, etc. The idea behind it amazed Naruto. He never even imagined that technology could progress this far, but he gratefully accepted it. Naruto had come to use this for everything. He would take pictures of his family's scrolls with it, write down personal notes in it, and basically use it to make his life easier. They spent Naruto's last 2 birthdays traveling to specific places Naruto wanted to. The first place he wanted to go to was the village hidden in the mist. Naruto wanted to see the horrors of war firsthand and help as many people as possible. They spent a month in the land of water, traveling from island to island helping evacuate civilians, healing the injured, and even fighting on more than one occasion. Naruto wanted to fight for the revolution, but Ace said that their location would be discovered if stories about a blonde 15-year-old started spreading to the leaf. He promised Naruto that he would return to the hidden mist and that they would fight for the revolution. Ace and Naruto got to know the leader of the rebellion, Mei Tiemru. She took quite a liking to Ace, oftentimes flirting with him and trying to seduce him. Naruto couldn't help but notice her beauty. She was in her early 20s, had long, auburn hair, and had a beautiful figure that many of her underlings gawked at. Naruto was surprised when Ace would flirt back with her, but then deny her advances. When he asked Ace, he told Naruto that he wouldn't sleep with her then leave to complete Naruto's training. He had too much respect for Mei and hoped to teach Naruto a thing or two about dealing with the Pharaoh. Naruto understood Ace's worries and Mei respected his decision, or at least she did when he promised to return when Naruto had finished his training. While they were there, Naruto notched his first few kills. They were a group of bandits that were raiding a refugee camp that got separated from the main group during a raid on the military base. He killed them quickly, 2 with his bare hands, 3 with his knives, 1 with ninjutsu, and 5 with his staff. Naruto's body moved on its own. He saw the attacks like they were coming in slow motion. Each kill was perfectly executed. No excess movements or missed strikes. As he stood over his fallen foes, Naruto expected to feel sadness or pity for those he killed. He felt nothing of the sort. He noticed Ace walking up and seeing the mess he made. Ace stayed silent for a second, analyzing everything he could from Naruto. Naruto took it as an invitation to speak. "I'm glad we came here. I needed to see this." Naruto's words were dead silent. He had seen mass murder, rape, theft, and abduction on an enormous scale. He was warned by Ace, but even his words didn't capture the horrors they had seen. "It's time to get going." Ace's words were soft, allowing Naruto a moment if he needed one. To his surprise, Naruto just nodded and followed him out of the camp. Ace was shocked at how well Naruto took his first kill. "Naruto, are you sure you're okay?" Ace stopped and looked right at his little brother for a moment. Naruto looked up, making eye contact with the Legion. "You always told me, we must be the change we want to see in the world. Well, the world I hope to create, a world of peace and prosperity, is worth the struggle for me." Naruto looked back at the bodies one last time. "They may have been the first to fall by my hand, but they won't be the last." Present time. Approaching the gates of the Hidden Leaf, Naruto couldn't help but think about the past year. He spent the year traveling all over the land of fire, getting acquainted with people and studying the layout of the land. He trained harder in the past year than he ever had before, reaching a level he was certain few others had. His power had grown immensely over the years. He had fully mastered teleportation, and was more than happy with his skills in telepathy and telekinesis. Naruto spent a lot of time training with ki still, getting as comfortable with it as possible. He had a firm handle on it for the most part, but oftentimes got sloppy when using it for extended periods of time. He really leaned on Ace to push him through some of the rougher times, which Ace happily did. Naruto's regeneration was a thing of wonder. He could regrow entire limbs within a minute now. He was also growing more accustomed to the pain of regenerating, making him achieve a pain tolerance that sometimes startled Ace. Ninjutsu-wise, Naruto had mastered individual elemental jutsu for fire and wind. He was particularly proficient in water as well, not quite achieving the level of the second Hokage, but it was definitely a goal Naruto had. He had mastered many lightning-style jutsu as well as earth, but the thing that he was proudest of were the Kekkei Genkai. Though he didn't have it in his blood, Naruto was able to use ice, lava, and scorch style to a level that demanded respect. Naruto was always very secretive with his usage of wood style, only training as far away from cities and towns as possible. He knew that the wood style was the most sought-after Kekkei Genkai in the world, and if there was even a rumor of someone using it, he would have all of the hidden villages searching for him. When it came to his proficiency in the wood style, it was hard to judge. The reason the wood style was so powerful was for its ability to suppress and even tame the tailed beasts. Naruto hadn't gotten the opportunity to face a Jinchuriki yet, but even if his wood style wasn't enough, he was more than confident in his other abilities. Whenever he trained in the wood style, the destruction to his training ground was ridiculous, but that wasn't exactly a surprise to him, considering the fact that it rips up the ground to summon the wood. If Naruto had to estimate his capabilities in comparison to the first, he would say somewhere around 2/3 of what the Hashirama was capable of. Naruto was pulled from his thoughts when Ace smacked him in the side of the head. Ow! What the fuck, Ace? Naruto barked, slightly agitated by the aching he felt in the right side of his head. Ace wore a cheeky grin as he held a hand out. I couldn't get your attention. By the way, you lost the bet. Ace's grin grew into a smirk. Naruto's eyes widened for a moment as he opened his mouth to protest, but immediately closed it, instead reaching into his pocket to grab out 10,000 ryo and handed it to Ace, who gladly pocketed the bill. Ace looked at his brother as they closed in on the grand gates that let you into the hidden leaf. So, you were thinking about them again, huh? Ace's words made Naruto flinch a bit. All the progress Naruto had made during their 11 years of training and traveling, but Naruto seemed scared to come back to the leaf. The only response Ace got was a stiff nod from the blonde. There's nothing we can do about it now, so stop worrying. Ace rested his hands in his pockets as they were now only a few feet from the entrance to the village. We just have to follow the plan and let the chips fall as they may, Naruto said as they walked through the gate.